Hi guys, in this Python Basics video, we're talking about if statements. Let's start by storing some values. So a variable called a, and I'm going to store the integer 10. And we'll go for b equals 20, c equals 30, and d, I'm going to go back to 10. Now let's talk about relational operators. Now you will have used some of these in maths, but let's have a look at how they work in programming. I'm going to create a print statement, and I just want to see if a is equal to b. So two equal signs next to each other is different to one equal sign. We use a single equals if we're actually assigning a value to a variable. Make d equal to 10. But if we're trying to check to see if two things are equal, we use two equal signs. And in your head, when you see two, you want to be thinking is equal. Two equal signs. So let's check to see what we get if we print a is equal to b. It prints false, because of course a is 10 and b is 20. But let's change that to a is equal to d. Now a is 10 and d is 10, so when I run it this time, it says true. Let's have a look at a few more. So what happens if I say a not equal to b? So exclamation equal means not equal. So remember, a is 10 and b is 20, so they are not equal. It should say true. Run it again, and we get true. Let's change it to d. Remember, a is 10 and d is 10, so a not equal to d should now give us false. And there we go. So let's carry on. Let's do another one. This time I'm going to check to see whether b is more than a. b is 20, a is 10, so I should get true. Fantastic. Let's do another one. This time I'm going to check to see whether c is less than d. c is 30, d is 10, so this should be false. Let's do another one. This time I'm going to check to see whether a is more than or equal to d. So a and d are the same, remember, so a isn't more than d, but it is equal. So when I run this, it says true. And one more. Let's check to see whether b is less than or equal to c. Now you wouldn't normally just print these relational operators. Typically you would put them within an if statement. So let's have a look at how that works. Let's use that first example, a is equal to d. So to start my if statement, I use the keyword if. Then I have to put my expression, which means I need to have one value, a relational operator, and another value. So I'm checking to see if a is equal to d. Now I end that if statement with a colon. That colon is really important. When I press return, you can see that on line 15, I'm now indented. That indentation is important. It's part of the Python language. Now notice that if I miss out the colon, as I often see students do, and I then press return, I'm not indented. And this is going to create an error when I try and run my code. So if you're typing an if statement and you see that you're not indented, that's your cue to go back and put in the colon. So that indentation means that I'm inside the if statement. Whatever I put here will only happen if a is equal to d. So let's put a message in here, something like a is equal to d. Now I'm going to press return. I'm still indented. I'm still inside the if a is equal to d bit of my if statement. I'm going to backspace so that I'm in line with the original if. And I can now put else colon return. Notice how I'm now indented again. Now I'm inside the else part. So if a and d are equal, it's going to print a is equal to d. Else, meaning they're not equal, let's make it print a different message saying a is not equal to d. When I run that, it correctly prints out a is equal to d. Now let's try changing that from is equal to not equal to. If a is not equal to d, print a is not equal to D, else print A is equal to D. So I've kind of reversed my if statement now, but the output will be the same. Now, as well as using if, we can also use elif, which means else if. Let me show you how that works. So I want to check to see whether A is more than B. Is 10 more than 20? Now, if it is, I'm going to print a message saying A is more than B. Backspace so that I'm in line with the original if. Elif, this is a second condition for my if statement to check. Space, and I need to put an expression here again. So now I'm going to check to see whether A is less than B. I've already checked to see if it's more. Now I'm checking to see if it's less. And let's print out a statement this time saying A is less than B. New line, backspace, so I'm in line with the if and the elif. Now I can do an else, colon. You don't write anything after else. Else is always the last available option. So if A is not more than B, and if A is not less than B, A must be equal to B. So now I can do one final print statement that says A is equal to B. Now remember, A is 10, B is 20, so I'm expecting it to print out this one. A is less than B. Let's run it. And there we go. Now we can also nest our if statements. Nesting simply means putting one if statement inside another. So I could do something like this. Let's check to see if A is less than B. If it is, then check to see if A is less than C. And if it's also less than C, let's print a message saying that A is less than B and C. Go ahead and run it. A is less than B and C. So remember, this nested if statement only runs if the first if statement is true. So let's have a look at a practical example of using if-else statements. Let's say that we want to count the number of vowels and consonants in a word. Now let's have a look at a practical example of using an if-else statement. Let's say that we want to be able to count how many vowels and consonants are in a string. Well, let's start by making a variable to store these values. So vowels equals 0 and consonants equals 0. And now let's go ahead and use a for loop to loop through all the characters within a string. So we're going to say for every letter in the string computer, if the letter is equal to A, then add 1 to vowels. I'm now going to take that if statement and I'm going to say elif letter is equal to E plus equals 1 to vowels. Elif letter is equal to I. O. U. So I've now got a series of if statements checking for the letter A, E, I, O, and U. And then finally, I can say else. Well, if the letter isn't an A, an E, an I, an O, or a U, it must be a consonant. So let's go ahead and add 1 to consonants. I've backspaced all the way back, so I'm not inside either the if statement or the for loop. So I know at this point that the for loop has finished looping through all the letters in computer. Now let's go ahead and print the number of vowels, and we'll print the number of consonants. Go ahead and run it, and you can see that we've got 3 vowels and 5 consonants. Now that is quite a clunky way to find all of the vowels in the word computer. There is definitely a shorter way that we could do it that doesn't involve using all those elif, but I use that example just as a demonstration. But let's go ahead and make this code more efficient. So I'm actually going to get rid of all of these, because I could simply say if letter in, and then have a string A, E, I, O, U. So that's much shorter, much simpler, does the same job. For every letter in computer, if the letter is in A, E, I, O, U, add 1 to vowels, otherwise add 1 to consonants. And when I run it, I get the same answer. Now, if statements are also really useful for checking user input or for validation. So let's have a look at an example. Let's say that I want to ask the user for their name. So I use the input function. Let's put a useful prompt for them to enter your name. So the user will type in their name and that will be stored in the variable name. I could then check to see if the length of their name is less than 2. And if it is, I can print a message saying your name is too short. Let's do an elif. This time I'm going to check to see if the length of name is more than 15. And we'll print another message. This time it can say your name is too long. Finally, we'll finish with an else. So the name isn't less than 2 characters, it isn't more than 15 characters, so the name is just right. Your name is the right length. So now you understand a little bit more about how if statements work in Python. See you next time.